Yes. Go ahead, please.
Right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the March community call. We're getting started with our first demo, and today we have Ryan Steans here, the Avalon community manager, to give us an update on the Avalon media system. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you so much. Hey, I'm Ryan. I know a lot of you. If you don't know me, I've been at Northwestern as the Avalon community manager for about a year and a half, something like that, a year and a third. Before that, I worked with Mike in Texas as part of the Texas Digital Library, where I was the assistant director. Avalon Media System is essentially a repository system for what we call time-based media, and that means basically either audio tracks or video. And I'm going to go through some real quick vocabulary if you're not familiar with the Samvera community. It's Samvera, you've probably heard of as the open source repository framework, but it's also a community. When we start, but because it's mostly a framework, it's all these kind of loose components. When we talk about all the bringing the components together into one solution that's really easy to stand up, we call that a solution bundle. And so Avalon is one of those, but it is specifically for AV access. Hyrax, on the other hand, is a Samvera solution bundle for institutional repositories and digital collections. So we were one of the first Samvera solution bundles. There's not that many of them, so that's not the world's hardest achievement. But we did solve a core problem kind of across the community. We grew up very fast, but we also grew up kind of alone, and we've been very much kind of a standalone stack within the Samvera community. But we are deployed currently at more than 10 institutions, some of whom have said you can name us. Others of them are always feeling a little bit like they're in this twilight zone between production and not quite production. But we are developed at Northwestern and Indiana. And we're definitely part of Samvera, and we use Fedora as, of course, our kind of back end to everything. Project funding, I'm just going to say very quickly, we've been very generously funded through multiple projects through IMLS and the Mellon Foundation. I'm actually part of an IMLS grant seeking sustainability for Avalon, which so we have a community manager. Right now, we are at Avalon 6.4. So we've had a lot of versions that have come out, numbered versions. We're working on kind of our numbering structure. But 6.4, what you should know about it is, if you've looked at Avalon before, is it is now easier to install. It does work with ohms if oral history is something that you are doing locally. For a very long time, probably too long, we depended on Flash. That is no longer true. And we now have adaptive bitrate, where you're not having to say, okay, I want to watch this in high def, or I want to watch this in standard def. It just kind of automatically adapts as YouTube would. So we're always kind of just pegging to YouTube as far as like those sorts of features go. There's some ongoing development right now around 6, and that will also go towards 7, where we're working with Artifactual to get workflows and scripts going so that we can have a one-stop drop for your preservationists and archivists, so they can push things to Archivematica, and it'll get automagically sort of pushed over to Avalon at the end, as well as over to wherever your preservation storage might be. We're also talking to some vendors and working through some things. We had a pilot for software as a service hosting with Lyrasis a while back, and they basically came up with a laundry list of things that we should probably do with Avalon if we want to have folks host it. So we're currently working on some of that. I'm going to talk a little bit about development of 7, and know that some of that stuff is getting backported to 6 because 7 is not coming out until early 2020. When it does come out, it's going to be basically feature parity for 6, whatever 6 is when we wrap up. And the reason for that is Avalon 7 is actually us, instead of having, I mentioned this kind of standalone stack, we're reimagining Avalon as a series of components that work with Hyrax and kind of sit on top of Hyrax So we only have to worry about the Avalon components, but everything under that is something that's supported and sustained by the community. And that includes the kind of Hyrax repository layer and then the Sambera core components in Fedora. And if you guys know about the Valkyrie adventures, we can talk about that as well. But you will have, I say 2 ways. I've kind of imagined 2 or 3 other ways that are a little trickier. But if you want to deploy then Avalon in the future, you could do it as a full Avalon 7 stack for our AV. But you can also add Avalon components to your Hyrax or Sambera stack. We're currently talking to one of the California institutions about taking some of the work the components that are done and applying those to their existing Sambera stack, because they have no interest in adopting like a parallel system in Avalon locally. They want to go ahead and make it, their custom Sambera. So that also means we're doing some support of Hyrax and the core components. So I'm going to kind of try and blaze through the demo, because if you want to see like a full blown out demo, there's one that we have in our what we call Pawpaw, which is our full demo site. And it takes about 35 minutes, and I have 20 and I've already used up 5 or 6. So I'm not going to do that. So we're going to talk a bit about groups, content management, playlists, and embedding from Avalon 6 into something like Spotlight. If you have any questions, I am more than fine with y'all just kind of shouting out and saying, hey, Ryan, stop. I've got a question, and let's turn it into a conversation. More than happy to do that. So is everybody okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So this is basically what Avalon then looks like when you come to the home page. Nothing hugely exciting. This is all very editable. If you go to the University of Houston, Avalon, for example, I always think of University of Houston because their only color is basically this really punchy red crimson. So every time I think of one that's been customized, it's really because every time I look at it, it burns the back of my eyeballs. But you're able to kind of change these banners around and do some different things. It may be that at some point in the future, if you're using something like Spotlight, you'd never really look at the Avalon main page because you might be using Spotlight to show your content. That would really be how you do it. And this would just be kind of an administrator's page. So you'll notice that we kind of have this somewhat faceted browsing. You can kind of go through and go by collections. You can go by genres. I don't know how well you guys can see these fonts. They're a little small. And you can, of course, sort by language. Up here, I am logged in. And so you can see I can manage content, manage groups, manage selected items, and playlists. Those are some of the things that I can take a look at. Within Avalon, if you're actually looking at an item, this is what audio would look like. And what you're looking at here is a 2 CD set of tracks. And so you can imagine if I'm doing an opera that has, any number of different tracks that would be, associated with that opera. Maybe it's the ring cycle and I need to just keep adding CD after CD, or however I want to break up these sections, I can do that. And so you'll notice here, this is kind of grayed out because that is the 3rd track. That's where I'm at right here. I've already listened to track 1 and track 2. And so now I'm on track 3. And if I want to see track 3 a little closer, I can see the timeline for that track 3. It'll start playing down here while it syncs to this up here, which is kind of a nice little feature. You can see kind of where you're at and where you're going. And I think you're going to start hearing a little bit of that Gustav Mahler playing here on my speakers. Similarly, if I wanted to, I'm going to start talking a little bit about playlists here. You probably can imagine, like if you have playlists in Spotify, or you have playlists in something like, Google Play or something like that. I might want to add this whole CD to the playlist. I might want to add just the track to the playlist, but I can do that using this button here and decide what I want to add. And I can even edit my start and end times. And I can add descriptions of what that track is and why it's in there. So if I'm an instructor and I'm wanting to create a playlist and say, okay, please pay attention to what Gustav Mahler does here in this track around, second, 22 or whatever, I can do that here. And we'll take a look at a little bit more of that. If I want to take a look at how I'm going to share this resource, I have some things that are, as you would expect. I can either share this whole item, I can share just this one section, which would be just this track. I can also embed this track if I want to. I've got iframes that'll allow me to do that with our current technology, and I'll talk about where we're headed with this in a little while. Similarly, we have LTI URLs, and what these are is something that you can drop into something like Blackboard or any other content management system that will enable you to link over to those systems. And it helps because I'm going to talk a little bit about groups in a little bit, because you can definitely attach Avalon to your Blackboard system or whatnot and tie it to course sections. And of course, over here you have your metadata. This is what's showing. And if you want to view your raw metadata, you can do that here. And that looks pretty much how you would expect your XML to appear. And of course, I can also view my Fedora objects from here as well. So I've got a lot of information, and if I want to edit how all of that works, it really is something that you do behind the scenes. We don't currently have, because we're not on Hyrax yet, we don't really have a way to change or edit how a music file is thought of unless you do it yourself kind of behind the scenes. But that is something that the Avalon team is there to help with, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Oops. So video within Avalon doesn't have quite as much flexibility. You can't create all the multiple tracks in quite the same way. You could do it by breaking something down into a playlist and using a playlist to talk about specific components within a longer video. I actually recently did it myself because we're creating learning objects within Avalon. So it was for, we created a video about batch uploads. And yes, you can do batch uploads. And so it was some instructions for that, and I broke that down into a playlist. But pretty much as you would expect, the video plays. It's I'm on Google Fiber here at my house, so the video is plays very easily and very well. If I want to add this to the playlist, I can do that. If I want to change what my bitrate is, I can do that. And if I want to create a new thumbnail for myself, I can do that as well. So I've got a lot of different features that I've got within here. I'm moving on now to groups. And so what a group is within your Avalon system, it's, of course, a group of people, a group of users. And so, of course, you have your system groups, and those are people with different levels of permissions. You can probably imagine the administrator is the person with kind of more power. A manager is somebody who has just kind of a level of permissions over specific collections, that sort of thing. And then someone who can actually manage their group. If I want to create the group, it's really, really easy to do. I just can type in a name. I already created other groups, so I'll create the Bolton group. And that's easy enough to do. And I can just go ahead and add a user. I don't think Mike's actually in our system. Oh, there he is. What do you know? So now Mike's in my group, and Mike will have access to any, if I take a video and I say, I want to assign group access to this, now Michael, if I wanted to add myself to that group, anybody else, that's one way I can control access. So I think that we're all pretty familiar with kind of how groups work and other repository systems. And before I move on, I want to see if there's any questions. Okay. We also have the concept of collections within Avalon. And so something that I might want to do is like Avalon learning materials. And so within this, can see a few different things. I can actually, let's go back to the Spotlight one, because if I actually touch that one, it's not going to mess anything up. So if something I want to do in here is say, okay, who are the managers? I can add managers and I can add editors and depositors to this specific group. I can also assign special access if I don't want this to be available to the general public, or if I don't want to say logged in users only. And of course, that's really good if your Avalon system is tagged to your local LDAP or other ID management system. But I can also do it specifically and say, you know, it's just going to be me and Mike who are looking at this particular collection. And I can also similarly pick from the groups and say, okay, you know, I want to pick the Spotlight group, and now they're the only people, you know, who can see this if I make it collection staff only. So, but I don't want to do that. I want to make this available to the general public. And so I can create an item very easily. I would just go in and select a file. And in this case, I'm going to pick cats, because we all like cats. And I am not going to skip transcoding, because I like transcoding. That's something the system does automatically behind the scenes. If you drop in your high-res file, it's going to go ahead and create those derivatives for you automatically. And because this video is about 3 seconds, it doesn't end up taking all that long. Or I can do it if I'm doing something in batch through the Dropbox. And that does not mean Dropbox.com. It means we haven't found other terminology other than Dropbox right now. But it basically means like an FTP server or some place that's a destination you would be looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and, of course, I can add some metadata in here. I'm not going to do that at the moment. Save and continue. And then I have the metadata librarian's delight here, where they can drop in all of their various metadata. And of course, we have little helper bubbles to help you along the way, and asterisks to tell you what's required, which is not a whole lot. Things like publication date are of course required. And so if I put in a title, and a date, and save and continue. If I have closed captioning, if that's something I feel I want to do or need to do, I can upload a closed caption file. Ooh. Okay. So then I'll have that. And now my video will have closed captions. Similarly, if you have structural metadata, if you want to break that longer piece down into multiple smaller pieces, you can absolutely do that using this upload. So we'll save and continue. But at the item level now, if I did want to say only, everything else in this collection is for the public, but we're not so sure about this one specific item. So let's make that collection staff only. And I'm going to make that the Spotlight group. They're the only ones who can see this. So I'll save and continue. And it takes a second to transcode as it goes through the conversion process. And anyway, that's more or less how you would upload your video. pretty straightforward. If you do it in bulk, it all just kind of chunks behind the scenes, sends out emails to tell you when you're done, that sort of thing. But now we have our video, and I'm going to reward you with some cats here very quickly. And so you can see where the metadata would show up, that sort of thing. I can go ahead and hit publish, and up it goes to the interwebs. So that's all pretty straightforward. I did want to talk about playlists a bit because you can do some very interesting things with playlists. Oh, and as long as we're here, I do want to remind you, since we're talking about embedding, how you would do it currently. You do have that iframe, really easy to do. And of course, you can share through the links in the LTI URL. Accidentally clicked on the little menu thing and it's wreaking havoc with me. Okay, let's just go to playlists. So perhaps for the Spotlight demo, I have just this playlist with this one item in here. I've dropped in a much longer video, but I have also dropped in part of the Avalon forum that talks about where we're headed with IIIF development and how that will eventually impact things like how you would embed video and how you'll be able to play it elsewhere with like the universal player, universal viewer. But also, if I take a look at, for example, the Wonder playlist, I have all of these different things that I have added to it. I can have video in here. I can also have audio, and you can see here I have the full, I don't know if you can see, but it's a 33-minute track. That means it's all of CD1 is here, versus I've added these tracks individually. If I want to edit the playlist, I'm able to do so. I can move these tracks up and down very, very quickly. So with that, I'm going to, because I know I'm running out of time, I just wanted to alert you guys, we talked about the Archivematica integrations are coming. We also have the Timeliner tool. We're going to be doing a demo of that next week at something we call the Avalon Forum. And what that is, it will enable you, if you have music faculty, to be able to create kind of these bubble charts on a timeline of an audio file. So if, say, you want to say, here's where the bassoons come in and go out, here's where this part of the movement is in this, this song, you can do those sorts of things. We are continuing to work with the vendor on the software as a service issue, and we're doing lots of work on Avalon IIIF integration. We're basically far enough along that we're kind of looking at that California school to maybe pilot some of that IIIF stuff. We are able to currently create 3.0 endpoints, and you can embed those into a media player, but it's a little beta-y right now. And we're working on implementing playlists using the IIIF presentation 3.0. If you want to know more about what's going on in the Avalon community, do please, you can connect with us with mailing list, Slack, office hours. We do have an Avalon forum, which is kind of a 30-minute webinar we do once a month. It's also put up into Avalon, so you can see it at any time. If you're considering Avalon, make sure that you get in touch with me, and we'll set up a group call between you and your team. I can also do demos at any time. And we're bringing up a new focus group concept called the Roundtable, which I hope to be contacting people about next week. And I am way over time, so I'm going to stop.
Should I go ahead and stop the recording, or are there questions? No questions at the moment, at least, so I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ryan.